We are live. Go ahead.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Critique Group panel. It's nice to have you all here today. Thanks so much for coming. To start things off, could everyone please kindly introduce themselves to the rest of the group?
So I'm Amber Scott. I'm the host for the Story Valley Writing Conference, and I'm also in this panel because I must do all the things here. I have I've done a lot, like not only am I hosting conferences like this, I've written a few short stories and published them in anthologies that we do ourselves, and I run a critique group in my server as well. So we are doing a few other things. Probably too much on my plate, but my normal day job is I'm a librarian in an adult high school. So I used to be one for elementary. So this is actually going to be my first year in adult high. So I'm super looking forward to this upcoming year. It's going to be very fun and very busy because, I also must do all the other things I do. But yeah, I'm excited.
8 piercing damage.
Oh, I thought I heard 18 and
Okay, my turn then. I have been part of many critique groups and critique partners where you trade. So I have learned a lot over the years from having people who will teach you to have a thick skin to people whose critiques just weren't very helpful. But I've also had a number of short stories and published and just helped in a bunch of things like the anthologies. So that's the part I really enjoy, obviously the writing, but also helping other people with their stories.
I think it's your turn now.
Oh, that's lovely to hear.
Roll me a con saving throw, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Sylvia.
Oh wait, I think he's doing the panel thingy.
So my name is Sylvia.
Okay.
So I've been in Story Valley
Hey, can you do a Constitution saving throw?
I have been with Blue for many years, and I have also
Okay.
been
You take
on Story Valley, both as a
4 poison damage.
but also as
Oh
a
man!
writer. There were a lot of challenges.
Oh no! Everybody else fell around.
The challenges
Fail the con save.
I can
You take 4 piercing damage.
because of primarily the company.
4 poison damage. And Ward will
multinational group of people
come up and block the way here, and he will attack you, Thales.
Everyone here because of the huge variety of writers that we have. And I'm looking
Okay.
forward to
First, no, just one attack. Just one attack. 21 to hit you, Thales.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I'm Del. I'm not sure what's happening with your audio, but yes.
Well, if he continues to have audio problems, he could always type in the chat and we'll read it for him.
Yeah, that's all right as well.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can kind of hear you. We could just mostly hear the other people more.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like a lot more.
Sorry. I was watching a D&D video. My mistake.
That would be wow. Multitasking.
Okay. Sorry, I'll pause that video now. So I'll just repeat that. I hope you guys can hear this better this time. As I was saying to Blue, I am one of the moderators on Story Valley. I have been there for a long time. In terms of critique groups, I have been managing a lot of critique groups there over the years, both as a regular member and also as the actual moderator for it. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of challenges with that in terms of pulling together a team from all over the world to find the time to schedule and discuss and read everyone's stories. But it was still a lot of fun, and I think that there's a lot to be learned from everyone here, especially since we have a very nice and diverse group of writers. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about more of that with you later.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yes.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Mhm.
So far, has everyone introduced themselves, or?
Yeah.
Yes. We're ready to
Oh,
go.
okay. Okay, that's all well and good. All right, I'll just get these questions up. I just wanted to ask a first question over here. Sorry. What different types of critique groups exist, and how can writers decide which style is sort of the best fit for them?
Okay. This is one I feel I can provide some input on. In terms of the critique groups, the different types, I feel that in my experience, there are, I guess, those critique groups that are, generally speaking, everyone is on the same page in terms of what the genre the critique group is about, the type of work that's involved, whether that's short story, longer novels, novel series, etc. Because those different types of stories will often require different types of critiques. And then there's also those critique groups that are very much more diverse, which is the type of critique groups that I was often overseeing. And as for how to make sure that you can get something out of it, I think there's always going to be some elements of writing that are going to be applicable regardless of your genre and the type of form of story that you're writing, whether that's short story or longer novel. For example, the mechanics of writing, the way to construct dialogue, the placement of exclamation marks, should it be within the quotation mark or outside of it, things like that. So it's always good to try to get as much feedback about the fundamentals of writing whenever you're participating in the critique group, whether it's a very diverse or a very focused type of critique group. But it's also good to understand the types of conventions that are present within the genre you're writing in, because there's some cross-pollination there. A lot of things, for example, like world building. If someone provides feedback about world building on a story that's fantasy, there's probably going to be some crossover, even if you're writing a story that's sci-fi. That can still apply. Those things.
Yeah,
So,
and to add on to that, when I'm giving feedback, if I feel like my where I'm coming from is different, like it's a genre that I don't super love, then I'll say that. I'll say like, hey, I read mostly this, but I think, so because like one time in a critique group I was in person, this very sweet lady said that she thought that I needed to spell out what AI stood for. This was a couple years ago, before like the Google chat stuff, because she didn't read sci-fi, so sometimes you can just share, this is where I'm coming from, and that'll help them weigh what you're saying.
Yep. Thanks.
Wow, that was a really insightful response. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. That was really insightful. Yeah, that was a really good response, actually. I wanted to also ask. Well, I've got a few more questions, but how can critique groups provide motivation and accountability for writers? How can you sort of give them that extra push?
I think for that, because you have that group of people with you, it's very easy for a lot of writers, especially if you're writing alone a lot, to either get into, like myself included, a huge puddle of self-doubt and whatever, and then think, oh no, I can't do this, or it can give you a good dose of reality sometimes, because some people, it is obviously your story that you're writing, and you think the world of it, right? As you should. And but sometimes you might be going overboard with it, and and then other people will read it and be like, you need to work on this and this, whatnot. So it can be definitely making yourself accountable, and but also people can help motivate you, because if you're going like a lot of authors sometimes, like writing can be a very lonely profession sometimes. You know, you're the one
Yeah.
writing your own words, and so sometimes you go through phases like if you have if you have doubts about yourself, and like, you know, and like, I'm not sure I can do this kind of thing. We tend to keep it to ourselves a lot of the time, and sometimes we feel like we're the only ones who are actually suffering this, you know. And but then if you're in a writing group, you'll find out everybody goes through these phases. You're not unique, you're not the only one, and because you yourself have gone through it, you can encourage others to also get through the difficulty, the highs, the lows. So that really helps a lot, having a circle of people around you to motivate you and help with whatever you're going through. And sometimes you get stuck on something, you're not floundering around on your own,
Yeah.
trying to do something. And because everybody got their own ideas, and sometimes the meeting of the minds really helps to have that
Yeah.
way to bounce off, right? Oh yeah.
And then also just having a deadline, because most critique groups that you'll be in say like, hey, we're meeting at this time, so you have to have it ready by then. So like one of my novels that I was editing, when it was my turn to submit, I knew I had to get that that section edited to turn in. And so, not that you can't get anything done on your own, but there is something different about having like this very hard deadline.
Mhm. And I'd also like to add that one of the things that critique groups provide is, generally speaking, just an audience. Because a lot of times, I like to imagine that when someone writes, even if they say to themselves that, oh, I'm just writing for myself, you know, I don't intend to share this writing with anyone else. At the end of the day, humans being humans, we are social creatures. If we create something and we're proud of it, or sometimes even if we're not so proud of it, I think there's that inclination within us to share that with other people. And I think just the knowledge that you have an audience or people who are going to be there to watch your work or look at your work, that I think usually motivates people to at least try to put their best foot forward. So in that sense, it motivates. And there's also the fact that when you have an audience, in terms of accountability, you always want to try to take on the feedback they provide, because most people want to generally get better at the things that they do. Hopefully, the feedback that they receive isn't so harsh, because in which case it can actually dissuade people from wanting continuing their craft. But at least in our group, within the groups that I've been participating in, everyone's usually more helpful than harsh. In any case.
Yeah, and I have like 50-50 feelings on that, because I actually don't hate the fact that some of my critique partners just taught you how to just take feedback, like not being mean, obviously, but just like, you need to look at this, or this is wrong. And just I do think some people need that first experience of being told that their work isn't perfect and learning how to handle that. Even sometimes if it's worded really nicely. So one thing I learned is that I usually don't respond back right away if it's like through text. Like I'll think about it, because sometimes my knee-jerk reaction will be like, no, because I meant this in my story and you just didn't get it. Okay. But then, you know, you wait a little bit and you're like, okay, maybe I do need to look at this, or maybe there's something else in the story that's causing them to react this way, even if I disagree. And just kind of like getting past that knee-jerk reaction. Or other people are just very sensitive to critique, like they're going to quit as soon as they hear that their story isn't perfect. And that's something you have to learn to work through.
Oh yeah, that was a really insightful response, and I agree. Actually, I mean, sometimes, it can be difficult to deal with certain situations, and obviously having accountability, but it can be a lot of pressure, and sometimes it makes you feel bad about yourself, and you might have this demotivation. But I get what you're saying. It's good to have feedback as well. Like your team is there to help you and push you towards your deadline, keep you motivated, and I absolutely agree. I think feedback helps you sort of improve yourself. Like even like obviously there's one thing to sort of insult someone, but it's another thing to actually give critique feedback. And I really like that response actually. Thank you. And I was going to lead on to the next one actually. I was gonna. It's sort of related to this next question I was going to ask. How do you think peer feedback can strengthen a writer's work of confidence? How can it sort of make you more confident?
I think there's a certain element of exposure therapy to this, in the sense that, people, I think, when they're first presenting their work to a group of people, and especially a group of people they might not know very well, there's always going to be a little bit of cold feet there. Will they like it? What will they say about it? But regardless of what they ultimately end up saying, positive or negative, I think just acclimating to the process, knowing the people involved and how they say things and how it affects your work, that's ultimately going to lead people to, first things first, not become as scared of the process as they might have initially been. And then, and this depends on the writer as well, if you're able to listen to the feedback and make adjustments accordingly, the knowledge that you're getting better at your craft is usually what precedes confidence. Because when you receive the feedback, you're probably editing it, and just the act of editing or writing work is practicing your craft. And you know what? I think it's a common saying that with practice comes experience, and with experience comes confidence. So you really can't discount, nor can you remove the experience aspect of it from gaining the confidence. One can become confident in something without ever exposing themselves to criticism, but that's bravado. That's,
Very
I
true.
think, slightly different. That's different from confidence, which is an acknowledgement, a true acknowledgement of your abilities. Bravado is obviously just insular. You don't take any feedback at all. So exposure, I think, just to the process will result in confidence being built up.
We were also I'm also going to add on to we'll touch on this in one of my other panels. But if you're trying something new, we were actually discussing in the and the other panel, not safe for work server panel, and that a lot of people lack confidence in that area, not just obviously the spicy thing, but anything out of the comfort zone. And that is actually a really good way to bring those things to a critique group, because you might think, okay, I'm stupidly terrible at this. I've never written this kind of thing before. Is it any good, or does it suck? That kind of thing. So having people to encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and try something new is really good, because you're able to say, okay, this is a good start. Maybe work on more internal, so whatever, right? Or no, actually, this is really awesome. I think you can do this, more of this, and show us more of this. So that really helps with the confidence boost that you're trying something new. And why not? So that is going to be very helpful for sure.
I think the most helpful feedback that people get is if the readers don't understand something. Sometimes they don't realize they didn't understand it, but you could tell by their question. So you're like, okay, what I meant to put in the story didn't get in there, So that can be really helpful feedback from writers and readers of almost any level. Would be like, If they didn't understand it, I need to fix it because clarity is like the number one thing. After that, you can get fancy, but they have to at least understand what you're saying.
One thing I will add to the question, it also that helps with confidence and your writers in the critique group is your use of what we call the sandwich method. So instead of being the one thing you don't want to do with pretty much any writer in your group, most importantly for people who are just starting in or newer writers, the sandwich method is going to be your go-to. And what I mean by that is that usually we start off with saying something that we like about the story. Some characters or the details or even a sentence or two that we really like how you did this. And then you get into your constructive feedback. We're like, okay, this thing you need to work on more. You need to put in more internals, or you need to crank up your grammar a bit more. So that's kind of like your quote unquote negative feedback sort of thing, but it's not really negative. It's you're saying this is what you need to work on more. This is how you work on this. Instead of saying, like, I didn't like how this scene went, and that's how you say. You're like, this scene didn't quite jive with the rest of it. Maybe these are some suggestions I have for improving that. And then you end with another bit of good feedback. I really enjoyed the overall thing, or I enjoyed, I can see how hard you're working at this. Like if you have somebody who's maybe the writer is very weak or something, but you can tell they're trying. Tell them that. So that is kind of our sandwich method. You start with something good, and then something constructive, and then something else that's good. So they're leaving on a good note to carry forward mentally. Yeah.
Wow, that was a really nice thing to hear. Actually, that you guys have a sandwich method, and I don't think it's negative feedback, to be honest. I think it's just more constructive rather than negative to see comments like that. I mean, just because constructive feedback is important. I actually agree. It's good to have constructive feedback to develop your writing. But yes, I was going to ask though, in regards to this entire critique group that's going on here. If I have an editor, do I really need a critique group? What do you guys think about that?
I would say,
Right.
yeah. Oh, sorry, Blue, you can go ahead.
It's on. So I actually do have an editor. He will be speaking later today at noon. I found that layering the critique group with my editor actually works super well, because what I did at first was I did have one of my books run through the entire book. I ran the entire most of it through critique group, but then I actually gave my editor the draft that critique had not seen, and he's very good at he's one of the ones that's really good at making sure that you get your money's worth. That you're not wasting your money. So, yeah, he's amazing with that. But he read some of it, and he's like, okay, you need to kind of like rewrite the whole thing. I'm like, ew. I'm like, okay. So what I did instead was I did rewrite the whole thing, but I ran each chapter through critique first before I gave it to him. So I got some eyes on it, and then when I gave it back to him, he's like, "This is so much better." I'm like, "Yay!" And it was better for me to work it that way. I know not everyone can do that, but you should at least have someone laying eyes on your work instead of just giving them. It gives them a little bit. No, I'm not going to say less work to do, but it gives them a better idea of what your potential is, because you've already corrected all the basic stuff, so they don't have to do to fix all of that. And so you can just go ahead and dive into it. If you're doing like a developmental edit, which is what I'm doing with my editor, which means that he's going into all the plot stuff, all the, like the arcs and stuff. But if I can correct some of those before he sees them, with my critique group, I'm saving myself a whole lot of work, and there's a lot, to be honest. And it also means I can maximize my editor and get my full money's worth out of it.
Now, I would say on the other side of that, there are some things that I have found, generally speaking, critique groups and critique partners are not good at, compared to an editor. Or if you get, there was one of my books that I probably ended up with like 30 different people giving feedback on at least part of it. And that was too many voices. Like I literally had the opposite advice for some of the same problems. So I think getting like a smaller group that you can kind of trust, and they'll help you do the best that you can do almost on your own, where they're like, this isn't clear, or they ask questions about this and that, and then you can fix it, and then you bring it to an editor. And I have noticed that sometimes in interviews with traditionally published people, they say the same thing. They have early readers, or they have some kind of critique group, and then they use their editor. Like they use both.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think it's just about realizing that writing, and in this practical case, producing a work, is a process, and critique groups and having an editor are part of the process, the tools to use in the process. If you were, let's say a sculptor, now I don't know much about sculpting, mind you, but I know that there are different chisels and different tools for that work. You can use a critique group just to produce a work that you could then publish. It's true, but it's probably not going to be the most efficient use of your time, and it's probably going to leave some blemishes on the final work, because a critique group, like Micah said, functions very differently from an editor. For one thing, it is the editor's job to help you produce the best possible work. Their entire focus is on it. And a critique group, on the other hand, is made up of other people who, depending on their level of experience through the editing process, can only give you so much. So it's also about layering and using the process to produce the best work you can. Ultimately, if you feel like if your story is good enough and you try to publish it and you succeed, then good on you. But I would still strongly advise to go through as many layers as possible if you want to produce the best work that you can. And in that sense, I do think that an editor and a critique group are both necessary.
One more time.
I think.
Sorry, I was going to say one more tiny thing I was going to add for the editor question is that you do need both. You do need both a critique group and an editor. Because Michelle has said, we critique group is some people like to think that a critique group is like the end all be all kind of thing. We're not. We're all authors. We're all like, unless you are an editor yourself, and you can totally do that. But yeah, you need both. You need your professional, because most of us aren't. We do our best. We can offer insights and all that, but we are not going to be the ones to be the ultimate professional that you pay to look at your work, kind of thing. So yes.
And I think one of the phenomenons that feeds into that is that we see the work and then we see you improve it. And we're like, yeah, that is so much better. And we like your story. Okay. And then we're satisfied, or it sounds like we're satisfied at least. And then the person goes and publishes that. And we're like, wait, I think you need to, you can also ask people, hey, do you think this is ready to being published? Even if you're going to go to an editor first. And I think if you ask that question, you might be surprised sometimes when people admit to you or realize, oh no, I didn't mean, I just meant it's a lot better. It's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Wow. I really appreciate that response. Actually, it's like it's not too biased. Like reviewing the positives of having a critique group and sort of having too many responses, it might be a bit overwhelming. But it's nice to see, you guys want to sort of work around, these things. I really like that approach. In regards to critique groups, in regards to making the stories, when would you think a story is ready to bring to a critique group? And when do you think it might still be too early to sort of release it? Sorry.
I'm going to use a simile here. I would say that a story is kind of like making cake. And the best way or the best time to present it to someone for their feedback is earlier on before it's taken its final shape, but enough forward in the process where the idea of what the cake or the story is supposed to be has been realized. It just hasn't taken its final form yet. So I would say a story is probably ready for a critique group when you, the author, have a solid idea of what it is the story is actually about. And you have a rough idea of how the story is going to go. And you at least have a few chapters written, because we can work with a few chapters and we can advise you about the best way to take the story going forward in line with what it is that you want to accomplish. But anything earlier than that, with anything less than that, the story, as it were, is probably still a little underbaked, and it could use a bit more time with the author before it comes forward.
Oh, sorry. I see. That's fair enough. In regards to the sort of in the critique group sort of being together, what would you say makes a critique bad or unhelpful? Sort of something that's maybe not working with the critique, and how can writers sort of recognize this?
Okay, so the other two are actually witnesses to some really bad critiques that I've had that were kind of like public in the group.
I mean,
yeah, I remember some of those.
It wasn't that
And
bad.
so we actually did talk a lot about it, like together too. Like, what about this made everybody agree, obviously except the person who gave the critique, that it was a bad critique? Like, what? And I think that the exaggeration, like the wording, did have a lot to do with it. So as much as I say, like, it's okay to be direct and like I have a thick skin and everything, but the way that they had said it was almost like there was no way to salvage the story. So when you're giving critique, if you're careful about not using hyperbole, like if you're trying to explain something and you're like using hyperbole to explain it, it can come off really not the way that it should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely avoiding hyperbole is one of the best things you can do to make sure you're providing not only good feedback, but feedback that is going to be listened to begin with. Because let's face it, most people, if they can tell that you're almost like out to get them, are probably not going to read the rest of what you wrote, even if you had some nuggets of wisdom in there. And I think one of the other things that makes a critique bad, or one of the things to avoid, is you, as the person receiving the feedback, in this case, need to know what it is that your story is actually about. And you have to be able to filter whether a critique that was given to you was sort of given by someone who is familiar with the conventions of that genre. Like if you're writing a sci-fi story and someone writes to you and says, "Oh, you spent time explaining how the science or how the world works that's boring, just move on to the action. Fair enough if they want you to get straight to the action, but there are still conventions within the genre you should adhere to. And if someone says not to do it or to do the opposite, that's probably not feedback that's going to be useful for yourself, even if it was given in good faith.
And sometimes with some people who do feedback, they can be super nitpicky and not focus on the larger work. I know for myself sometimes I'm nitpicky with grammar, okay. But I know I am. So, and I know not everyone is great with that. And so for myself, two times where I kind of deep dive on the grammar is usually if the person is new at writing. And sometimes, like I can be a little bit, I'm not going to say aggressive, but I'm going to say strong with the grammar part, because the grammar can make or break your story, your sentences, right? And be more clear, and have more clarity and all that. So I would do that. And or if they're not like brand new or whatever, and they're kind of fairly late stage writing in their book, and they're still making kind of basic a lot of errors, and I'll be like, okay, you need to clean this up, right? But that's not going to make it bad. If I know the whole passage, and I know they're going to be like rewriting it, whatever, I'm not going to bother with grammar, right? Because that's just going to be complicated. It's going to change. So you kind of have to like figure out what is fight your battles. So like pick your battles, right? Like and sometimes people focus too much on one thing at the expense of everything else, right? So you have to kind of realize that, hey, they're being a little bit too nitpicky about that, and a good way to decide if this person's being super helpful is that's why you kind of want to have more than one person reading your story in your critique group. Because if you have, like, say, an hour, we typically have about 4 people, sometimes 5. So if you have one person who's like totally slamming you for something, right? And everybody else is like, yeah, this is fine. You're like, okay, so that is sometimes a good indicator to see what they're doing. Because some people can, like, the aforementioned incident, some people feel superior with their own ideas, and they think that talking down to other writers will make them feel better about themselves. And
Now, I actually don't think the person who gave that bad feedback was not trying to be helpful, but if the person cannot appreciate your vision or what kind of story it is, and they're basically telling you to make a different genre or a completely different plot, then it might not be the most helpful feedback. And then I think what you said about different stages of writing is really important. Sometimes if the grammar, like, you feel like somebody maybe needs just like a reminder or a leg up, like if the same mistake is in there multiple times, sometimes I'll just mark the first one and give like a link to an explanation or something. Or like you said, if it's not in the later stages. But I don't want somebody to think their work is ready to publish, like to hit publish, when it's absolutely not. So you can gently say, usually you might have inline edits, but then also a summary at the end. So you talk about how great the story is, but then you say, like, I would still run this through, a check, like it's not quite ready yet, or something like that. And I've also been in critique groups where we didn't I know we usually share in Google Docs, right? So everyone can see everyone else's comments. I find that super helpful. And I was in one where they're like, no, we're not going to do that. You need to send it individually to everyone. And then so that they can't see other people's comments. And I was like, what? But I want to see other people's comments so that I can say,
I enjoy that too.
I actually like that part you didn't like, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I suppose it's just don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, it's one thing to have someone constructively say, "Oh, you know, I like the story," or maybe I didn't like the story. You can do this better. This needs improvement. In comparison to someone who reads one line and then says, "All right, that's it. The rest of your story is rubbish. Stop doing writing and stuff like that." Yeah, I like that. I really like that response. Actually, it sort of shows who's giving good constructive critique and who's sort of just being a hater, to be honest. Did anyone else want to put a bit more regarding that question, or?
No, I think the other two quite well covered all of my feelings on the topic as well. The benefits of having gone through some of these critique groups together, I suppose.
If that's all good then with the other two, then if that's good with you and the others, then it's fine if I ask the next question. In regards to, obviously we have sort of critique from other people, but what about within your own group? How do you sort through conflicting feedback from your group members?
Well, we kind of already kind of covered a little bit of that already, but like that is why it's good. Yeah, that's why I like having comments on everybody, like from everybody on the same document, because you can kind of see if people are agreeing with each other or they're not. If you feel that people are being conflicted on a thing that you wrote, it probably means that you likely do need to rewrite that section, maybe because maybe you're not coming across as clearly as you think. You know, and this is inciting questions about what your goal was or your motive for that section was. So if you are getting that split opinions on it, definitely this is a good way to just slow down and kind of ponder over what you were trying to go for. And you can also ask other people, like for myself, if I get that, I ask my editor and be like, okay, people are split about this. What am I doing? You know, and or whatever. So, but not everyone has an editor, but I do. This is my cheat sheet. I'm like, I go to John. I'm like, hello, help.
I think even people who don't have an editor or don't have one yet, they still might have one or two people that they trust more than, like, you kind of understand you can't go 30 different ways on something. So you need your own vision, and if you need help checking your own vision, that's when you go to like the one or two people who can help center that for you. So what I find is that most people's feedback is helpful to some degree, but if they're but maybe the way they think you should fix it is only one of 20 different ways. And that's the part where your decisions come in and trying to figure out how to fix it. Obviously not grammar, but like, even if you have a clarity issue, so now you're like, okay, I have to explain this better, but there's so many different ways to do that.
I know we'll probably touch on this in the accessibility panel, but that I realize that is where sometimes people who are like autistic or other neuro whatever and
Neurodivergent.
how people take it very thank you, that was the word I was looking for. They take things very literally, so sometimes if we get a lot of feedback that's all different, they try to put all of it in, like all of it in. And they're like, okay, no, so you need to make decisions like this. What? Yeah. John will always say writing is the art of making decisions. So sometimes you get conflicting feedback. You're like, you have to decide for yourself which one is the one that shows your vision and your plot and your story best. So yes.
Yeah, because because no one story, no matter how well written, is always going to please everyone. So you'll always get some conflicting feedback. But I think the way you handle it is having a good idea of what it is exactly that your story is actually supposed to be, and then, like Lou said, making decisions that will reinforce that story or create that version of the story that you want. But it is good to know if there's a particular area that's contentious because, like Lou said, it probably means that you just need to rewrite that part to clarify it a bit more. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe it would help to like when I to explain to give an example of when I got like feedback from like 30 different people. So one person said that I should spend like multiple scenes starting with him going to school and kind of, you know, setting the background and explaining what life was like. And then another person said I should start later than I had started. I mean, both those people can't be right, you know. And that is more of a personal preference or a genre convention of like, well, what genre are you writing? If your novel's gonna be 180,000 words, maybe you do need to spend a couple scenes setting things up a little bit more and just giving hints. But if it's like a short story, that's your whole short story, you know. Or if it's like a 60,000 word novel that's a urban fantasy or something, it really so some of it's personal preference and some of it is your vision. Like I could have gone with either of those feedback, but I can't go with both.
Yeah.
See, fair enough. I presume it is like communication plays a lot into teamwork roles like this. You have to sort of communicate with your fellow writers.
Oh yeah, so I'm sorry, I remembered I meant to say this. So in those cases, or in almost any case, you thank people for their feedback.
Yes.
But yeah, you thank them, but you don't necessarily like if you critique someone, you don't come back around later and did you follow all 20 of my comments or anything like that, you know? That's so it's not like they're your teacher that you're gonna have to
Yeah.
check in with later. You just thank them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fair enough. That's really that was a nice response from you guys, and yeah, I think hopefully you know this can continue. Did you guys want to add anything else on this whole like conflict in feedback critique section? So I just had 2 questions left.
You can go ahead. The next one, that's fine.
All right, no worries. It was my second to last question actually. In regards to these different genres, how do you handle these different genres in a single critique group?
Well, it probably helps if everyone in the critique group, including yourself, are readers of many different genres because that makes it easier. But let's assume conservatively that people are not the most diverse readers because who has the time to read all of the different genres every day? But the way I've tried to handle it in the past, especially as the giver of feedback, when I read a story and I don't know what it's initially about until I've actually read it, I try to understand what type of story this is supposed to be. As in, was it a short story? Was it sci-fi? Was it fantasy? Was it romance? Or because the way you give feedback to different types of stories and different genres is going to vary from story to story. And the really the best way for you to be able to give feedback is have experience with all of those different genres. Now, I try my best after having read the story to research a bit more into the conventions of those genres and match it with the author's intent. Did they say they want to publish? Did they say that they wanted to just share it in a community group and not publish? These sorts of things. And I try to tailor the feedback that I provide later on with those in mind. It's not going to be perfect, especially because I'm not able to fully immerse myself in every single genre. But I do try to have a little bit of experience with each of them so that when I suggest something, it's not coming out of left field. Like there's some backing to it. So it's essentially research. I'm saying do your research, learn about what the conventions in that genre are, and then try to provide feedback in line with those rather than just follow.
Yeah, and but for me, like I, every story going to be, in every genre, you're still gonna have your different beats that are fairly similar, no matter what genre you're in. Like you're always gonna have your action beats. You're always gonna have your dialogue stuff. There's always kind of a framework to work with, no matter what genre you're working in. So, if you have like a fight scene going on versus, the people talking, it's still going to be, some sort of um, thing that you similarities that are going to be in various stories, and because it just matter, it's just the topic of just those stories that are different. So, but it's also a great way to sometimes expand your knowledge of other genres. Like I have been reading in one of my critique groups. I have this guy who liked. I tease him terribly because his work is great. It's like very Japanese style, and yeah, I tease him because it's like I say this is anime is balls, come on, and because I'm very much not into anime. Please don't hate me or anything. Don't come after me. But but I actually ended up really enjoying his story after all because it was fun, And I was like, oh, okay, I actually like this. So but I'm not gonna like every single story either, but that is totally okay. But like if I'm not really into the story, that is fine. It's not my job to only read stories that I like, if I'm helping other people and critiquing them. And that is where you find with your editors as well, because I remember asking John, do you actually like the stories you read? And he's like, most of them no. And but he's like, it's his job, and he really likes being able to dissect everything, and that's what we need to be able to do sometimes. Sometimes we need to yes, we're going to obviously cheer on the other people, but we also need to sometimes put it, how do I phrase it? We need to like separate the heart from the head sometimes, and be able to explore the other genres and like give helpful concrete feedback on what we're reading, even if it's not our thing, kind of thing. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think most groups that I've been in are we're talking really about the differences between subgenres. Like most groups I'm in don't have, oh, this person's writing historical nonfiction. Most of them are kind of like spec fit groups. So even if it'll be a genre close enough to yours. And if I don't like long battles, then just hopefully there's other people in the critique group that do, because I'll just kind of skim those and give feedback on the rest.
True.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was. Sorry. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you don't have to. I liked about the you don't have to. Like it's nice to have an open-minded approach to like, oh, you don't have to like every story, but you can still read it. But like, it's just nice to hear something like that. I was just gonna ask one last thing in regards to these critique groups, because I do like these. But if you could give one piece of critique to critique groups in general, what would it be?
I would say, and I know it's challenging, especially in critique groups that are not in person, and especially across different time zones. But the process only really works if everyone is able to take the time to actually read the stories beforehand in full. because one of the things I've noticed is that due to different schedules and obviously different life commitments, sometimes when people come into the scheduled critique group session, they might not have read the entire story, or if they did, there was no indication of it because they didn't leave any comments or on in this case, the Google Doc that we were using. So please engage with the process. It works best when everyone's has shown some commitment to it. Otherwise, it kind of breaks down a little bit, which I have noticed from time to time, as the other two can attest. So yeah, engage with it. It's the best way to get out of it as well. You get what you give in most of the time. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And the critique group that you've been in, that I know about, is one where you guys meet at the same time online.
Yes.
So some of the ones that I've been in, like the one I was laughing that they didn't want to use Google Docs, we emailed each other, and I actually love that part because everyone doesn't have to be available at the same time, and they just have a deadline to get their feedback in. And I think that can really work. I just would have liked to have it on Google Docs. That's all, instead of sending a separate copy to everyone, like we used to back before Google Docs existed. But yeah, you can have different forms of critique groups. So if at the same time doesn't work, then find or even create a group that works the way that works for you.
Yeah, ultimately, it's like you say, there are different ways to structure a critique group. Definitely doesn't have to be like a live session, but my point really is that when everyone says that they'll commit to something, in this case, whether it's a send an email or live critique group, there's an expectation that everyone will either hold up to their commitments or at least inform people if they can't. And sometimes that communication was lacking where someone couldn't make it to a critique group session, but they didn't tell anyone. So everyone still read their story, still provided feedback, but sort of didn't get anything in return from them. And it's not ideal, but it does happen. So constant communication and commitment really is ideal.
For me, my advice for people would be actually don't be afraid to shop around for your critique group, because not everyone is going to be the right fit for everyone else. You have somebody that sometimes I know it can be intimidating. Sometimes you have a critique group that's very well established, and then you have this complete beginner join you. They're going to be very overwhelmed sometimes. They're like, oh, and some people are very cool with complete beginners joining them, and some people are not, and that is actually totally okay. Either way, there's no right or wrong way to feel about it. Some groups are very close knit and they know each other really well, and that's okay too. But if you're in a critique group and you're not jiving with them, or they're being they're stomping on you, that is not good. But feel free to seek out other writers. There are so many of us out there, so if something is not working, don't feel bad about it. It's just, the process of finding your slot, you're finding your space, your little niche, that is okay. So that is my advice for sure. Make sure you are in a group that is going to be supportive of you, but also they're not going to be afraid to, you don't want to be handheld either. So spoon fed, like you don't want to have always them praising you up and down all the time, because that's not how you learn either. So you're gonna have to be able to feel supported, but also have a thick skin. So that's my piece there.
And I know that most of our advice has been for like bigger groups, but since I mentioned critique partners too, one of the big things that I've learned is if it is one or two people, you might do a sample chapter, agree to exchange a sample chapter and not your whole novel. Because I have been in situations where, like you said, not everyone shows up. Maybe something happens. I remember one time a new partner was like, I'm sorry, I was in the hospital, right? I'm like, that's fine. But you might critique their whole novel or find out that you really, really, really don't like it, or that their feedback for you really doesn't work, and you're stuck with like, you know, a whole novel. You can do like samples, or like when it's the critique group, it usually is a short piece, and then like you said, you can shop around.
Yeah. Sure.
Thanks so much, guys. Honestly, that was very insightful and educational. I really appreciate the your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Right,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
that was a lot of fun for sure. Okay, I believe we are now officially out of time, but we are only 2 minutes over. We're fine.
We should be all right.
Yeah, we're fine. Especially with me, because I'm running the whole thing, right? So, man, we're good. No,
Don't burn yourself out now.
yeah, no, I will definitely not do that. But yeah, that was great. I will go ahead and thank you guys for coming, and we'll post this recording later at some point. But yeah, I'm gonna let you guys go so that our next panel can go, which is the plotting panel. So we'll go ahead and check that out as well. I will
Fantastic.
stop the recording.